So the Vessel of Hatred expansion for Diablo 4 is bringing with it a ton of new content, and one of these new systems coming with the expansion I think is being glossed over by a lot of people in how important it's going to be for Diablo 4 going forward. And this new system being the Kurast Undercity, which we also just got a ton of new information for from the most recent developer livestream. Now the Kurast Undercity is a new multi-floor time attack dungeon that allows you to customize your loot. And I think this customization of your reward is actually one of the most important parts of this system. And this is also why I think this is going to be very important for the end game with the expansion and just the end game of the future of Diablo 4. Because you're not just going to be able to customize like what types of loot you get or trying to farm different rarities, but you'll be able to customize even things like affix rolls on certain items that you'll be getting. So this is definitely going to be very important even when you get deep into the end game. And the actual gameplay of this system also seems pretty interesting because it seems like it's going to play quite a bit differently than most of the other dungeons in the game. Now, how the Kurast Undercity is going to work is it's going to have two different systems that tie into it while you're actually running the dungeon. You're going to have a timer, and you're also going to have a meter you build up, which will determine the rewards you get from it. So you enter this dungeon, let's say you have 60 seconds at the start, there'll be a big circle you start in. Once you leave that circle, the timer starts. And on top of that timer, you'll also have this meter that builds up as you're killing enemies or doing any events within the dungeon. You fill up this meter. Every time you hit a new section of this meter, you get more rewards. So getting to these different sections just gives you more loot at the end. And you'll have to get to at least the first section to get to the boss and get loot out of that specific run. And on top of that, there's also going to be afflicted monsters within the dungeon that will have a symbol over their head. If you defeat those enemies, you will get an increase to your timer. And this is going to be pretty important because at a baseline, this dungeon will give you a bit of time, but as you get into the higher difficulties and start tying some of the other systems into this, you will have a much less starting time. So finding those enemies that gives you more time is going to be very important for getting the most rewards you can out of the Kurast Undercity. And another really cool part of this dungeon is that they made a new goblin specific to the Kurast Undercity called the Portal Prankster. And this treasure goblin is kind of designed to waste your time. So it's something that you really have to weigh. Do you want to take the time to defeat this goblin, or do you want to just skip it? Because this goblin just spawns bunches of portals around, and it'll constantly walk into these portals, which takes him to a different portal he spawned, and he'll just keep running in and out of all those portals, kind of designed to waste your time. But if you defeat these goblins, you'll get a bunch of additional loot. I think specifically they give you a whole nother chest at the end that gives you a bunch of different loot like runes or tributes, which we'll also go over in this video, and then just bunches of other loot. So it can be really strong to defeat one of these goblins, but it's also very interesting that they're actually just adding more goblins into the game. Now, where this system actually gets really interesting in terms of rewards is once you get into tributes and bargains. Now, tributes are basically a key for this dungeon. Now, you don't need tributes to do any runs of this dungeon, but tributes will augment the rewards and different aspects of your run. And what tributes primarily do is they define the rewards you're actually going to be getting from the dungeon. And there's a handful of tributes that all do something different. So you have the Tribute of Growth, that completing the dungeon with at least one attunement rank will reward additional experience. And that attunement rank is just the meter you're filling up at the dungeon. Like I mentioned, you have to get to the first section of the meter to actually get to the boss to get the rewards at the end of the dungeon. So the Tribute of Growth gives you additional experience. This dungeon is being talked about by the developers to also be very good for leveling, and presumably it's going to be really good when specifically using this tribute. Now, on top of just the additional rewards, this also adds affixes to the dungeon. So say for this Tribute of Growth, the reward is upgraded. So again, it gives you experience, but the starting time is set to 100 seconds. The time bonus penalty is now minus 15%, and the potion drop penalty is minus 20%. And all of the other tributes will also have more or less of these reductions, which will guarantee runes as one of the rewards. And the affixes it adds, you now have a starting time of 75 seconds, so your starting time is going down. down, your time bonus penalty is minus 25%, and your potion drop penalty is minus 30. So you're getting less potions, you're having less time within the run. Then we have the Tribute of Radiance, which will reward you with Ancestral Legendaries, and Ancestrals are completely different going into Season 6 and into the expansion. Ancestrals are always max item level. They're the only items of the game that you can fully craft on now. They always have a guaranteed greater affix, so these are going to be very strong items, and now you get guaranteed ones with this tribute. Your starting time is 60 seconds, minus 35% time bonus penalty, and minus 40% on potion drops. And then for the final tribute, we have a Tribute of Ascendance, and this will guarantee Ascendant Unique. And the explanation of Ascendant Uniques is that it will just guarantee you several uniques with an increased chance to give you a mythic unique. So this seems like it'll be a very strong tribute later into the end game, but your starting time is now 45 seconds, your time bonus penalty is minus 50%, and your potion drop penalty is also minus 50%. So you have a handful of these different tributes that start to allow you to choose your rewards, but that's not all, because then you also have a bargain. So once you put in a tribute, there's also a different section that allows you to choose a bargain. Now these bargains allow you to customize your loot a lot more than almost any other system in the game, and all these bargains are going to have a different cost. So they may cost gold, they may cost a specific resource, they may cost obols, and they all do different things. And these bargains do have different rarities that also seems to determine the prices. So maybe you use a Tribute of Radiance, which gives you guaranteed ancestral legendaries. Maybe one of the lower rarity bargains just gives you a guaranteed chance to make those boots. But the much more interesting bargains are the more expensive ones, and they gave some specific examples when you're using a Tribute of Radiance. One of them is called skill ranks. Legendary armor will always possess at least one skill rank affix, and this costs 5 million gold. So you put in your tribute, you choose this skill rank bargain, it costs 5 million gold, and the rewards you get at the end of the dungeon will include some guaranteed ancestral legendaries, and any legendary armor you get will always have at least one skill rank affix on it. So that's actually really strong at trying to get some of these more sought after items. But the really crazy bargain was called passive ranks. Legendary amulets will always possess at least one passive rank affix, and this one costs 50 million gold. Now this is completely absurd because pretty much the strongest and most expensive items in the game, especially if you're trying to trade these, are necklaces with passive ranks to them. And a lot of these passive ranks that people are going for on necklaces are things that give you multiplicative increases. So let's say a multiplicative damage increase, that if you can get multiple or more ranks of that passive, you're just multiplying all the damage you're dealing. So that necklace could absolutely just give you the biggest power increase possible. But these necklaces can have so many different passive rank increases that they're usually very hard to get and incredibly rare. But you could just run this, use your tribute, put in a lot of gold. 50 million gold is quite a bit. All of the necklaces you get will have guaranteed passive ranks on them, which is just absolutely absurd. Even if you don't get the one you want, you could still get some very valuable loot that then you could go sell to another player for a lot of gold as well. So the mix of these tributes and bargains will give you a lot of control over the loot you're actually getting. And then optimizing how you play within these dungeons, optimizing your build, will allow you to get even more rewards, because as mentioned, you also have these different sections that you have to build up that give you more and more rewards at the end. And I think there's 4 total sections. So the first section is the biggest one. Once you get to that first marker, you'll then actually get loot from that run, but then you have 3 more sections you can fill up that'll just give you more and more loot. And then as mentioned, at the end of the dungeon, there's going to be a boss you have to defeat, and there's 3 unique bosses for this new system, which is something I'm a very big fan of. I don't want them ever again just reusing the Nightmare Dungeon bosses for another system. I'm glad they're not doing that with this, and these boss fights that they showed a little bit of one of them off actually look much more interesting and much more involved than a lot of the other boss fights, so that's something that I think is very good as well. But on top of all of this is also going to be very good for leveling. In fact, they've explain this as more as a leveling content, which is a bit confusing. It seems like it's going to be very good if you can get that experience tribute, but because of how the difficulty systems in Diablo 4 is going to work now, the system is going to be as endgame as any other system, and I think this is going to be a highly utilized endgame system just because of how much you can target farm items. I think everybody's going to be going in here, especially to target farm those super good necklaces or other items that you need very specific rolls on to make your build work or just give your build a massive power boost. So I'm looking forward to the Kurast Undercity, and I'm especially excited to have a piece of content to where you can actually go and somewhat target farm necklaces with those passive ranks on them, because that's legitimately just one of the hardest items in the game to go farm for. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.